Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today, using this classic painting guide from 2014, I'm going to be painting up a Blood Angel Space Marine and seeing if the painting guide still works in the modern day. So the first thing I've done is I've primed the model black, as this will give us a nice smooth, even base coat for the rest of our colours to work from. Now, as always with Blood Angels, the first thing I'm doing is coming in with my Mephiston Red, and I'm going to paint this all over the model. I'm going to make sure I get this all over the power armour, sinking it into any of the recesses. I'm going to work in a couple of smooth, thin layers to slowly build up to a solid base coat of Mephiston Red all over the power armour to the Space Marine. At this stage, I'm really not worried if I get this over any other areas. I will be coming in and painting these different colours later on. But for now, I'm going to make sure I work in a couple of thin layers of Mephiston Red until I get that smooth, even coverage all over the power armour to the Blood Angel Space Marine. You want to make sure you work this into all of those recesses, getting full coverage all over the power armour. I don't want to leave any parts of black showing at this stage. Just make sure you coat all of that power armour with a couple of layers of Mephiston Red. By keeping this nice and thin, we'll slowly build up over 2 or 3 layers until we get a solid base coat of Mephiston Red all over that power armour to the Blood Angel Space Marine. So I'm using a classic painting guide here and seeing how these results will match up on a modern Primaris Space Marine. And after a couple of layers of Mephiston Red, you can see how I've got that even coverage all over the power armour. So the next thing I'm going to do is paint all of the black details on the model. For this, I'll be using Corvus Black. I'm going to paint this over areas like the undersuit, so all of these ribbing parts here sticking out between the panels of the power armour, making sure I catch these with a couple of layers of Corvus Black. I'm being really careful around the power armour I've already painted. If I do make any mistakes, I can tidy back up with Mephiston Red afterwards. But make sure you catch all of these parts of exposed undersuit with a couple of layers of Corvus Black, so we've got a nice solid black coat all over these areas. I'm also going to pick out any of the straps on the model. So like these ones here on his back, just catching these with some Corvus Black as well. Any cables, so he's got some on his helmet here. There might be some on the arms and legs, different sculpts as well. Catching these with some Corvus Black. At this stage, I'm also going to catch the Aquila on his chest as well. So obviously being really careful around the power armour, making sure I catch all of that Aquila till I get a nice solid black Aquila. Just going to paint the belt going around his waist as well with some Corvus Black. And I'm also going to paint all of his bolt gun as well. At this stage, I'm going to get the muzzle, magazine areas like that, but I'm going to be painting silver later, because black just gives a slightly nicer base coat for silver than painting over the red that I've caught on the gun during the base coating stage. So just make sure you catch all of these areas of the undersuit, belts, strapping, cables, and the bolt gun with a couple of layers of Corvus Black, so we've got a nice solid coat all over these areas. And with the black applied, there's a lot of the details picked out on this Blood Angel. So the next step is I'm going to start painting the metallics. For this, I'll be using Lead Belcher. And I'm going to pick out all of the detailings on this weapon, so the muzzle, the magazine housing, parts of the scope, all of the parts of the gun that want to be silver. I'm going to make sure I catch these with a couple of layers of Lead Belcher. Obviously being really careful around all the other colours we've already painted. Just catching these with a couple of layers of Lead Belcher. There's also these detailings here on the side of his helmet. So I'm just going to catch these with some lead belcher as well. And finally, I'm going to get all the vents on the backpack. So he's got these ones down here at the bottom of the backpack. There's also the vents at the top. So I'm just going to make sure I catch all of these with some lead belcher as well. So he's going to take a couple of layers to get that solid coat. Just apply a couple of layers of lead belcher to get a nice solid metallic all over these details. And with the lead belcher applied, there's only one final base coat left to apply to this model. And that's going to be with some Retributor armour. Just going to apply this over the Aquila on his bolt gun. So be really careful around the black and just catch this Aquila with a couple of layers of Retributor armour. And with that Retributor armour applied, that is all of the base coats applied to this Blood Angel. So the next step is going to be to shade the miniature. So the first shade I'm coming in with is Agrax Earth Shade. And I'm going to apply this as a pin shade to all of the power armour. So wherever we've got a recess in the power armour, coming in with a little bit of Agrax Earth Shade and applying it into those recesses. This step is going to take a while, but just make sure you take your time, work your way around the model, and apply Agrax Earth Shade into all of the recesses on the power armour. So the painting guide at this stage actually says to wash Agrax Earth Shade all over the power armour. But honestly, then you've got to spend ages tidying it back up. So I find it is quicker in the long run to just pin shade into all of the recesses. This step will take a while, but it is much quicker than shading all over and then having to come back in with Mephiston Red, paint back over all of the areas of flat panelling, just leaving the recesses darkened down with the shade. I find it's much quicker in the long run to apply the shade very carefully as a pin shade all over the power armour. And then if we do come in a little bit too thick at any points, it's really easy to tidy back up just with small amounts of Mephiston Red in anywhere that we've overspilled. So just take your time at this stage, work your way around the power armour, applying this thin pin shade of Agrax Earth Shade into all of the recesses, edge of all the details, lining every part of the power armour. And finally, I'm just applying this as an all-over shade to the gold Aquila on his gun, just so it sinks into the recesses. Now next up, with some known oil, I'm going to shade all of the details we painted black and everything we painted with lead belcher. So I'm going to carefully apply this to all of the parts of the undersuit, letting it sink into those recesses and add the definition to these regions. I'm also going to carefully apply it all over the Aquila, being really careful not to get this over any of the Mephiston Red power armor if I can help it. Make sure you also apply this as an all-over shade to his bolt gun, shading both the Corvus Black and the lead belcher to really add definition to all of these areas, really make the model pop. So just apply some known oil all over the areas we painted with Corvus Black and lead belcher.
If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you would like to support the channel and become a member, please press the join button down below.
And after those shades have dried, you can see how they've added definition all over the model. That recess shading on the power armor's really made it pop. So now it's time to start applying some highlights. The first highlight I'm going to apply is Evil Sun Scarlet, which I'm going to apply as an edge highlight to all of the panels of the power armor. Some of these sharper ones like this, you can use the side of your brush. Just work your way around all of the panels to the power armor, applying an edge highlight of Evil Sun Scarlet all over the Space Marine. Now for these, I'm applying them slightly thicker than just a pure edge highlight, because I'm going to come back in afterwards and apply another highlight within these. You don't want to make them too thick. You still want to keep them nice and thin. Just make sure that there is enough room to apply another highlight within the Evil Sun Scarlet. So this step will take a little while, much like with the pin shading, but it really is worth the effort of taking your time, slowly working your way around the model, and applying these edge highlights to all of the panels and all of the raised details to the power armor. I'm just tracing my way along the edges of everything that we applied the recess shade to, and applying a thin edge highlight of Evil Sun Scarlet to all of these panels. When you're applying highlights, I find if you keep a nice even pressure on your brush, you'll keep the lines a nice consistent width, which keeps them looking nice and neat as we work our way around the model, applying these highlights all over. If at any point you do think you've come in a little bit too thick, you can tidy back up with a bit of pure Mephiston red. Just cut back into those highlights and thin them down. But for now, just work your way around the model and apply an edge highlight of Evil Sun Scarlet to all of the panels on the power armor. With the power armor being so much of a Space Marine, it really is worth taking that time, making sure you get these highlights exactly how you want them, because this is going to be the main detailing on the model. So it really does make the model pop when you get these nice, smooth, even lines all over the power armor. I'm applying this edge highlight of Evil Sun Scarlet to all of the detailing on this helmet. So this will end up being the focal point of the model. It's really worth taking your time, making sure you get these exactly how you want all over the helmet to our Blood Angel Space Marine. Don't forget to also apply these highlights to the backpack as well. Just apply them to the edge of every panel and every detail. Make sure you catch these with an edge highlight of Evil Sun Scarlet. With that highlight of Evil Sun Scarlet applied, you can see how it's brightened up the edges of all of the panels, added a little bit of definition to the Space Marine. So now it's time to come in with another highlight, and that's going to be with some Fire Dragon Bright. I'm going to apply this within the highlights we just applied. So for some of these points, I'm just applying it at the sharpest angles and sharpest points on the model, things where two panels meet and details like that, because this is a very bright colour. It's not the highlight I would normally use on Blood Angels, but it's what this painting guide said to use. So I'm applying this at some of the sharpest points, steepest angles, areas like that. I'm applying a thin edge highlight of Fire Dragon Bright, which I'm placing within the Evil Sun Scarlet we just applied. Normally I would highlight this with Wild Rider Red, but the painting guide skipped that and said to go straight to Fire Dragon Bright. So this is going to give some really stark panels, but hopefully when it dries it will be a little bit less bright and will give us a really good looking bright Blood Angel. So much like with the previous step, just take your time, work your way around the model, applying the really thin edge highlight of Fire Dragon Bright within the Evil Sun Scarlet we just applied. So you can see on this panel on his leg, I'm just applying it at the corners, not giving it a full edge highlight all the way around, because I feel it'll be a little bit too stark and a little bit too bright. Same with this one here on his back. I'm just catching the corners, emphasizing that sharp point with the brighter highlight, making sure I leave the Evil Sun Scarlet showing through. So just take your time at this stage, work your way back around the model and apply highlights of Fire Dragon Bright wherever you think the light would catch the most on the power armor. and just to emphasise some of those sharpest points on the Space Marine. And after that fire dragon bite's been applied, you can see how it is a very bright highlight on the model, but it has made those panels stand out, really upped the contrast on the model. So now I'm using Mechanica Standard Grey. With this I'm going to highlight all of the areas that we painted black. So I'm going to catch the top ridges of all of the parts of the undersuit, just making sure I carefully catch the sharpest ridges, the very tops of all the ridges on the undersuit, making sure I leave that black showing around and the shade in the recess. Also doing the same to the belt as well, catching the top and bottom with a thin edge highlight of Mechanica Standard Grey. And on the Aquila, I'm going to just very gently highlight all of the feathers to the wings and the skull, making sure I don't come too thick so this doesn't look grey, just highlighting those details. And for the gun casing, I'm just applying an edge highlight all the way around all the panels on the gun, making sure I make this one a slightly chunkier highlight so I can come back in the next step and apply another highlight within this one. And with that Mechanica Standard Grey applied, you can see how it's brought out the details of all those black details. And so now with some Dawnstone, I'm going to apply an edge highlight to some select details. So on all the feathers to the Aquila, I'm just catching the very tips of the feathers with a small highlight of Dawnstone, making sure you can still see the Mechanica Standard Grey and the black. And on the bolt gun, I'm applying a thin edge highlight of Dawnstone within the Mechanica Standard Grey we just applied. This is why I came in slightly thicker with the Mechanica Standard Grey, so it would leave me room to come back in with the Dawnstone and apply this highlight within the previous one. And whilst doing the same to the belt as well, just catching the very edge with a really thin edge highlight of Dawnstone just to highlight the belt. And with the Dawnstone applied, the model is really coming together now. So the next step is I'm going to paint the eyes. This guide says to do this in a slightly different way than I normally do. So first of all, I'm coming in with White Scar, which I'm going to sink this into the recesses for the eye lenses, obviously being really careful around the rest of the helmet that we've already painted and highlighted, just catching these eye lenses with a bit of White Scar. And then with some Athonian camo shade, I'm going to sink this into those eye sockets. So the original guide actually called for one of the old out-of-print glaze paints. GW don't make those anymore. So instead, I'm using a shade paint to try and do the same effect. It's not quite as bright as it should be, but I think it does work. Gives the impression of green eyes on the Space Marine. So now there's only a couple of final details left to apply, and that's going to be to highlight the metallics. So first of all, I'm using Stormhost Silver. I'm going to highlight everything we paint with Lead Belcher. So all of the parts to the gun, I'm just catching these with a really thin edge highlight of Stormhost Silver, making sure I keep these nice and thin, and just picking the very edges of the metallic details with a thin edge highlight. Also going to catch the one on his helmet as well, and of course all the detailing on the backpack. Just also making sure I catch this with a thin edge highlight of Stormhost Silver, just to give the impression of light catching on the sharpest points of the metallic details. And with the Stormhost Silver applied, there is just one final highlight left to apply to this Blood Angel Space Marine. And that's going to be with some Liberator Gold. I'm just going to catch the edges to the feathers of the Aquila on this bolt rifle. So just keep these nice and small and just catch these details with some Liberator Gold. And with that final highlight applied, that is how to paint a Blood Angel Space Marine using a painting guide from 2014. So please let me know in the comments down below, what did you think of this Space Marine? Do you think that Fire Dragon Bright highlight is a little bit too stark? But thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, an extra special thank you to Jenkins, our Tea Lover channel member. Thank you so much for the support, and happy painting!